Welcome to the Buildwise Podcast, where we'll explore the ins and outs of building a high-quality, high-functioning custom home that stands the test of time. I'm your host, Jordan Dugan. Each week, we'll meet with builders, contractors, homeowners, and tradesmen to learn the insider tips and tricks you can apply to create homes that are truly a cut above. Whether you want to improve your building process, apply new, high-performance techniques to your next project, or simply learn from the best in the business, the Buildwise Podcast has your back. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Buildwise Podcast. I'm Jordan Dugan, and today I've got TJ Vitense with us with Sanctified Homes and Construction. TJ, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, buddy. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. So how are things on your neck of the woods?
Yeah, it's still a little cold here. I'm obviously up in Wisconsin, so still building away, but probably another month or two before we start digging any foundations, which it sounds like is, well, I know it's different than you. You're mostly slab on grade, right?
Yes. Yeah, it's I'd say probably 95% slab on grade. A few basements. Used to do a lot of pier and beam here, and it seems like it's kind of just gone away.
Yeah, makes sense. So, yeah, I appreciate you reaching out and asking because, a huge thing, obviously, in our industry, and I'm sure it's the same where you are, but like I can get my building license in a weekend, honestly, here. And the standards are so low in this industry, and that's why, some of the stuff I've hit on before and things that we're putting out is like, just raise your standard. So I don't know how much you're running into that, where you are. We kind of pre-talked before the show, but it's a difficult thing here when you're trying to show doing better than the standard is almost in our area is a must-have. I don't know what you're seeing in your area.
So we're obviously not as cold as you guys are, but we do have a huge delta T, right? I mean, we might get down -10 on a cold winter, and then we're 110 in the summer. So look at 120 degree swing. So that stuff's important, even though we can kind of have a little bit of a shoulder season where we end up with 60-mile-an-hour winds, but it's 70 degrees outside. But yeah, it's everything's kind of built to the minimum, kind of built to make the most profit off of for the least amount of work or the least amount of materials. And here, an upgraded home right now consists of a high-end countertop and faucets, not necessarily the bones and what's going into the building of the house.
Yeah. So I guess we didn't talk about this, but do you have a lot of tract home builders around you?
We don't have any like national production home builders here yet. We've got, I'd say 3 or 4 pretty decent size production builders, and they build between 300 and 500 homes a year. And they're mostly at the entry level because that's kind of what their demand is calling for.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got, of course, ever since I guess really pre-COVID and all that hit, the market for builders just exploded here because of the demand. And so everybody and their cousin decided they wanted to become builders, whether it was after their normal job or on the weekends. And so that's kind of starting to fade out with, interest rates have kind of pushed some of those guys out, and we're starting to normalize, which I'm excited about.
Yeah, that'd be great overall if that real estate market could balance out a little just with, I don't know where you're at. We have such a lack of inventory, but we run into the same thing. We have, Lennar just came here, which is a huge tract home builder, but we have some other ones like you that are like 600 plus homes a year. And you run into that where it's like, oh, they put in granite, and that's what the client sees. I always call it the pretty. Like everyone loves the pretty, but it's the details that matter if we're going to have a home that's going to be around, last a while, let alone like a big thing for us is safety and health, So why aren't we talking about safety and healthy homes? Because everybody knows someone in our area, at least, that like, oh shit, they had mold in the walls, or we had a leak, or my kids can't sleep at night because their allergies are so bad. And we can get into some of that stuff, but just the standards as a whole across the country, and especially in my area, just have to be raised.
Yeah. I think so many people just look at a house right now as it's something to keep me semi-comfortable out of the weather. a place where I can rest and sleep, and they don't look at, hey, you actually spend a lot of time in your house, and one of the things that's in your house is air, which is a fluid, and that is the most consumed fluid that you have in your entire life. But we're going to pay attention to the diet that we're on, the things that we're drinking. We're going to make sure that we exercise, but let's not pay attention to that fluid that we're ingesting the most of throughout our entire life, and in the source of clean air and the effects that that can have on your health. That's kind of mind-boggling to me that nobody has even really talked about that in our area.
Yeah, and most people weren't listening to me when I first kind of started talking about ERVs, for example. But Canada had those wildfires last year, and that air was actually coming down to our area, and they were telling people not to go outside where we were. Right. Well, then they were just locking themselves in their home, where now at least I have something to say, like, hey, just because you were in your home, you still felt it in your home. Let's make sure the lungs of our home are good, so that we are thinking about that air in our house. So I don't know if you have a good example for that, but that helped tremendously where we were when I was like, hey, you can't just bring in air willy-nilly.
Right. Yeah, we don't tend to get a lot of like wildfire smoke every now and then. We're close to the Rocky Mountains, semi-close to it, I guess, about a 4-hour drive from here. If they get something really bad, we'll kind of get a haze from it. We'll have seasonal allergies, but the big one here for us is dust. And there's people don't understand that if you tighten the house up and control the air that comes in and out of it, the amount of time that you spend cleaning that house is dramatically reduced. And of course, that dust is bringing other pollutions with it that we may not see with the eye, but we're ingesting. To be able to filter that out and make your life healthier, and not have lung-related issues later on in life because you made a smart decision to integrate that into your house. That's huge.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things with it, right? Like we could probably talk for hours just on this subject, but one of our other big ones is we have a lot of radon where we are. Yeah. So it's how are we taking care of that without having to like, hey, let's do the code and then we'll test for radon and maybe put a radon system in. No, let's just plan and detail it right, where most homes where we are, when you air seal it properly from the basement up, we can put a passive system in and it's taking care of any high radon levels.
And it's much easier to do when you've pre-planned it, and cheaper to do. Just go ahead and put it in than it is to have to go back and integrate that into a house that's already been built that's having issues.
Yeah. But when you're, it's that one's easy to talk about and get people to understand that when they have kids, because especially radon is more harmful to young children because they breathe in so much more because their lungs are building and whatnot. As some people are getting older, I still think, we're doing a pretty good job with getting that stuff explained and understood why we do it that way. But I still, when you're talking radon's the number 2 killer, lung cancer killer. And it's not more of in our area, a required thing to just like test for it in every house, especially every new house, and make sure it's safe. It's a little mind blowing to me.
Yeah. So TJ, I hadn't told everybody yet how we kind of met and got to know each other.
Yeah.
Both of us were a part of Phius Certified Builder program, where we went through training and took a fairly difficult test to certify us as a Passive House Institute of the U.S. Certified Builder. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and tell us kind of how you got into it and what you learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. So one, a little difficult. I think it was like the longest test I ever took. I remember in the class, they're like, 20 to 40 hours. I'm like, 20 hours, I'm done. I was over 40 by far, just researching and then like, oh, is this right? Oh my God.
Yeah, the worst part about it is we didn't get results for like 2 or 3 weeks after we took the test.
Yeah. I'm like, oh yeah. So, learning about it, right? So it was, for a long time, I've just talked about in all areas of your life raising your standard. But what I ran into in building in Wisconsin is like, you can get your contractor's license in a weekend. And honestly, it just depends on what test comes up for you. Like when I took mine, there was so much stuff about HVAC and the calculations and whatnot. I'm like, this has no bearing on if I know how to assemble a house or put it together properly, or, do I know what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
So as you're digging, and I think people that have the mindset like you do too, Jordan, is like, I want to do better as a whole for the industry, but it's like, I want to put a product out there because I believe in this so much that it's like, we need to take care of our clients on things that they don't even realize. Mm-hmm. So as I'm going through that process too, probably like you were, it's like, okay, there's all these different certifications. But this Phius one, right, stood out as something that's a high standard to hold yourself to. Now it's a really high standard, and I hope someday we'll actually get somebody that wants to do a full passive house system, but I also get the tremendous cost of that. Mm-hmm. But the principles we learned in it, and I'm sure we'll get into it, was like, hey, we can still incorporate a lot of this without spending, 25% of the budget just to make sure you can get a certification.
Right. So a lot of those were, application theories, not necessarily product theories, but the attention to detail that needs to be paid on those key components. And we can still do that with traditional building materials. And for the most part, traditional building practices, we're just slightly altering those a little bit and getting so much better performance out of the house. Mm-hmm. For not near the cost upgrade that it would be to actually certify that as a passive house. But yeah, I'm in kind of the same boat here. I don't think there's a lot of people that are willing to be the first that want to actually get one certified and say, hey, we've got the first certified passive house here in Amarillo. And that's not necessarily why I went through that training. Mm-hmm. I went through that training to have a better understanding of those core components that go into it. That can allow me to be a better builder in this area. And I think that's kind of the same for you, is it not?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, we've seen the other stuff with how to make a home Energy Star certified, but none of those are like the modality or things that are just around. I kind of like it how you said it's not a specific product we have to use to get to passive house. Mm-hmm. It's a modality of how that house is assembled, and there's all kinds of products to get it to that way. But it's wanting to do a better job and build a better home and understand, the 4 control layers that they talk about in passive house and how those work together. That fundamentally is just not, it's not taught at a level that it should be. Like, I agree. Most people aren't going to do a passive house, but those fundamentals, we should be hitting on those a lot better than we are.
Yeah, we're still in the building culture here that a lot of people still believe houses need to breathe without any RV or a successful mean of getting air in and out of the house other than through the walls and windows and doors and cracks. And not to say that process didn't work for us as far as the building health, but the occupancy health was not what it could have been. And now with new innovation, new products that we do have, and new building techniques, we have a way to make buildings last so much longer than they ever have, and be so much healthier than they ever have, and more comfortable than they ever have. It's just been a lag of hey, we can do this, let's do it, instead of, well, let's just do it like we used to, and we can charge more money and make more money at the end and not have to put the money into it. So,
right. Yeah, I mean, you see the track home guys that are building a house that's literally just to code. I'm like, a code built house is literally the worst built house that you can have.
Yeah.
I don't care what you put inside, right? But I mean, your home should be the healthiest place you are because you spend the most amount of time there. Mm-hmm. And like, I mean, there was a lot of things that led us to passive house or the Phius standard, right? But a huge one was health. And people are raising their kids in their home. And who knows what the government's going to do if they shut us down again and make our kids homeschool again. Like, you want that to be a safe environment, let alone if, you have real bad air quality, which it could be dust or sand in the air like you have, or, we had the wildfires come down and blow smoke in our homes. And it makes a difference when you're talking about how that assembly goes together. Because if we control what's coming in, like, we're protecting our building better, but more importantly, it's like our health in that home. What are we preventing that we just don't even realize that's giving people sicknesses and whatnot with the way we're building right now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So health is, probably the strongest argument that you can make on these type of upgrades. But the other one I tend to also incorporate is the comfort. And most people don't really understand how comfortable a house can be until they've been in either a near passive house or an actual passive house, to realize the difference in how quiet the house is, how the temperature doesn't change from room to room, all these characteristics that go into that house. And what I find ironic is somebody will go and they'll spend $15,000 on their vehicle upgrade to have the big screen and their dashboard and heated seats and a steering wheel, and something that they might drive 30 minutes a day. But yet you talk about putting an ERV in the house, and depending on what you do, you could put one in for as low as $4,000 or $5,000 of a base package. But they're like, no, we don't need that. We don't need that. Why do you not want that comfort in that house when you want it in something that you spend literally a 10th amount of time in?
Yeah.
So I found that interesting.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because the amount of time that honestly, we are spending at home. So many more. I mean, most families have somebody that is either staying home or they work from home.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're just even, compounding on that. You're not just sleeping in your home and spending a couple hours at night in the morning there. You're literally there 20 plus hours a day.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's not as healthy as you can make it, I mean, healthy, comfortability is too, right? But healthy, and then let's make it comfortable. So, you're not sitting in front of that window and it's 95 degrees on you cooking you,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, okay, well, when we're looking at what are the windows that we're putting in our house, let's say based on some of the Phius standards, now we're not putting in, at least us, we're not putting in triple pane European tilt turn windows, but we can still look at the glass in the window, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
our Energy Star ratings are kind of a little bit of a joke. Like we need to look at the details of the window for thermal bridging, the type of glass we're putting in. Is it a reflective glass? Do we have wood floors? And are we going to cook those floors? And you've seen the homes that like there new wood floor in 6 months looks like crap for a number of reasons, not
Mm-hmm.
just the windows cooking it. Probably a water sealing detail was also messed up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's outside of the comfort. The one that industry honestly probably tries to sell the most, and I find it the hardest to be accurate on, is the energy and cost savings. And it's like you get all these customers or these builders, contractors, whoever, vendors as well, that will say, oh, if you install this product or you build this house this way, we're going to save you $5,000 a year. And it's like, one, how do you know what my energy bill is right now? Two, how do you know that I'm not going to put 7 plasma TVs and 2 servers in that house that have nothing to do with the way the house is built? So I tend to shy away from saying, oh yeah, we're going to save you all this money if you invest in it. I just like it to be kind of a surprise byproduct. Like, hey, we built you this durable, comfortable, healthy home. Guess what? Your energy probably is going to be a little bit less than what you've been used to. So enjoy that as well.
Yeah, I don't even bring that up. I mean, if people want to talk about it, I'm like, I could take the leakiest farmhouse built in the 1800s and I can make it net zero. I'll just put enough solar up.
Yeah.
That's not a good indicator of like, you're building it well.
Yeah. And so I think like hers and Energy Star ratings, they basically allow that in their point system, right? So you put a bunch of solar panels on it, you make that zero energy house, and it's like, good, we just knocked you down. You're now rated at a 50 HERS score. The rest of the house might not be built very well at all. Whereas this passive house approach, you can't do that. That's not gonna fly and get a certification. And so we've learned that, hey, we got to think outside the box other than just dumping a bunch of solar panels either in the yard or on the roof and trying to tell you that you have a high quality, high performing home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And that's, there are at least in our, there's some builders that say they do better insulation and some of these other things, but we know from that passive house standard, if it's not detailed the right way, who cares? If you're, like I said, you could have a net zero house just because of the amount of solar you put in, but you might sit in one corner of the house when it's 30 below here and you're freezing.
Mm-hmm. So TJ, we've kind of been talking about some of the, I guess, the effects of the control layers that we have on the house. Do you mind kind of walking us through some of the components of the passive house design, and those core components that truly make a house better?
Yeah. So when you're really looking at least, well, not at least, but from the building standards, but a lot, and Phius is what are the 4 control layers, right? And then they talk about them in order of importance. Mm-hmm. So, you know, when we're looking at building a house, and when honestly, when you're sitting down with a designer and you're drawing it, you have to be thinking of that stuff ahead of time because, you know, if we're talking about, let's say, the thermal layer, which is the last one and least important, but there's a ton of ways to detail that, right? Like you could, in our area, put down a 2x8 bottom and top plate and then stagger the studs 24 on center. Mm-hmm. So, and we're doing that to stop thermal bridging.
Right.
But we also have to look, well, I'll just start at the top, right? So water is our first one. And we know water causes most of the issues and problems and destroys homes faster than most anything else. Mm-hmm. So looking at passive house and how we look at the water control layer, and what people really understand about that is water is not just that droplet or your glass of water, right? Water is in the air around me right now. So when water, and we have a delta difference where your outside moisture is hitting your wall, right? Our water resistive barrier, our water barrier. If that delta is different, it's going to hit that, turn into moisture, and run down. Now we know the traditional way people are doing homes, and unfortunately how they're detailing, most of them are doing a house wrap. That water hits that, runs down, and anywhere that's not completely encased is a problem. And that's why you see a lot of windows that rot out the bottom because it's not sealed right.
Right.
So water's big, right? And then it's going to be our air. Mm-hmm. Right. So how do we make sure we're air sealing the home? Because why do you want to spend money on the lungs of your house, like the ERV, the furnace, dehumidifier, or humidifier, if we're not going to air seal it to make sure we're bringing in that healthy home? Because if our home's not healthy and the air's not clean, and it's just we're going to let anything come in from anywhere, there's no point in spending the money on that stuff. Like,
right.
There's people that are talking about doing it more ERVs around here, which I think is great. I hope they make it a standard that you have to put it in, and then people realize, okay, well, we're spending the money on this. We need to air seal it properly. Right.
And then there's this kind of, you know, you got water sealing and air sealing, your control layers, and they it's not black and white. It's not two different things always. They also kind of merge together, right? So by controlling that air control layer and having those systems really detailed to where you're not freely letting that moisture latent air come into the house, that's another key area where builders who are kind of halfway doing this, maybe they're using zip system, but they're not detailing it correctly. They're not paying attention to it. We're getting condensation on the backside, the inside of that sheathing now, because they've left all these air gaps for that water to condense, that air to condense into water on the inside, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then like a scary part with that is, and when they were talking about building tighter homes a long time ago, what they didn't realize is they were trapping moisture in the walls.
Yeah.
That's the worst of all, right?
Yeah.
We have to understand that moisture is going to get behind our, I say cladding, but if people are not in the trades, right? It's any type of siding that is on your house, whether it's stone, concrete, smart side, vinyl, moisture gets behind there. It's going to hit on that wall. And then what happens to that moisture? We want to be able to dry it out or get it to go away. Mm-hmm. But you know, the way the codes are, it's not as important as it should be, for especially for when you talk the water detail. And the water and air are going to go hand in hand, because if you're water sealing it right, you're doing a lot, you're taking care of a lot of those air details. That, you know, going on top of that more is, okay, well, when water gets in there, we can't just use any system and think that, oh, okay, well, the water's not getting into our house, because some people are putting systems together that now that water's trapped behind here, but it has no way to get out and dry out. So that's a problem. But yeah, for sure. I mean, they all go hand in hand, right? Like we need to think of all of these things to make that's what makes a safe home, but it also makes it comfortable, right?
Right.
And then if we get some energy saving benefits, great. I mean, there's a lot of incentives and programs out there, from the heat pump water heaters to solar discounts, if that's routes people want to go. But we can do a lot with that Phius standard modality and do a lot of traditional type things that are not way out there, that are going to cost significant more. Like you're talking percent, like 5% or less, to do a lot of stuff to have a very safe and healthy, comfortable home.
And longer lasting on top of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, people talk about the ROI, the return on investment on some of these upgrades. And it's okay. Yeah. If you sell your house in 2 years, then you're going to enjoy the comfort and healthiness of that home. But, we kind of have this westward expansion mindset where it's like build with what's available and then move on to the next thing, right? You look at Europe and they literally pass houses down from generation to generation, and those houses are capable of doing it because they've been built that way. To me, that is the true ROI. Like, I buy a house and I know that it's still going to be in good shape. That ultimately, if I was to decide this, my grandkids could overtake that house one day and still be a healthy, durable, house that has little to no maintenance and is going to be around for their generation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's totally right. It's the way we structure it and put that home together. Well, we already know over time styles change, but you can change the kitchen, but the house is still going to be there another 500 years from now, or ideally 1,000, right?
Right.
And it's not like crazy things, it's making a little bigger overhang, right? There's tons of little details like we could go into with that. But I think that having that baseline knowledge of, hey, I mean, kind of jumping back, I thought when I started that Phius class, I'm like, I know some stuff. And it was just, I was like, holy shnikey. Like, our standard is so low. I didn't even think about some of the stuff that we were learning. I'm like, now there's not even a question of it.
Yeah.
So, we need people understanding that.
So we've gone over water and air control layers. You want to pick back up on that?
Sure.
Too? Okay.
Yeah. So then, we get our water, we're going to get our air, and then our next most important is our vapor, right? So vapor is it's going to be a form of water, but people don't see it because that turns into water in certain areas of your house. It's important because, like I said, when there was the big push in like the 80s to have a tight house, their failure, it probably wasn't just water driving and getting in. It was vapor getting in, and there was no way to have it dry out, right? So now we have so many great products that allow that product to dry out, but aren't necessarily going to get or let water in there. It's somewhere else that if vapor is getting in between your wall structures, it has to be able to dry out. Where we ran into problems originally thinking of a tight house because people would put the wrong wallpaper on, or honestly the wrong paint, and then that stuff got trapped in there, and homes were like, they were being torn down in a couple years in some cases.
Yeah, so kind of the nerdy side of that, right? There's usually a permeability rating on a lot of these building materials. And unfortunately, when they started to build houses tighter, they, for the most part, were using vapor impermeable material, or low permeability in the wrong spots. I guess is also a common practice back then. So you would have these slight leaks throughout the house where vapor drive came in, and then it was near next to impossible for it to find its way back out, which is kind of what you're describing. Yeah. And now we have so much more knowledge on the products that we're using, the permeability of them. We have smart, vapor barriers that we can use. The permeability actually, changes depending on the moisture content in that material. So yeah, we've come a long ways and learned a lot how to keep that issue from happening and still allowing us to build a tight, healthy home. Right. So do you want to take us to the last of the control layers?
Yeah, so our last one is going to be thermal, right? So that's if thermal is last because it's just the order of sequence, right? Because if we have a home that's getting water in it, it doesn't matter what your thermal control layer is doing. Same with some of the other stuff, but it's a huge component to how comfortable is my home, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a huge thing we have, especially being in a cold climate, is that thermal bridging. So the thermal bridging, like if you're not a builder and you're just kind of a homeowner that found this, right? It's right. We're taking a 2x6 wall where we are. I don't know if you can build 2x4s where you are, 2x4 walls.
We can.
Okay. But anyway, you're taking that and anywhere in your wall, maybe I should turn like that. So this is my wall. I have 2x6s running into it. And then I have drywall here on the inside. Everywhere where you have one of those studs, you have thermal bridging because our code is R19 in our walls, which again is way too light. But if I have an R19 where those studs are, I have like an R5.
Mm-hmm.
So builders will tote, well, I do an R21 wall or I do an R19 or where you were, I think you said R15 or 13.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not really true. In Phius, that standard, and it should be anywhere. Let's look at what the true effective value of that whole wall is with the studs, with the insulation, with what are the windows and doors in that wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can really say like, oh, actually, if you build to the standard in Wisconsin, you're probably getting like an R7 for your overall effectiveness.
So you're talking about total R value, total wall R value, right?
Yeah.
Framing makes up 20% of it. Windows make up 20 to 30% of it. So your insulation is only fitting in those gaps. Mm-hmm. And so that total value of insulation in those gaps minus your, R5 of wood and R6 of windows brings your total R value down to 9 or 10.
Yeah. It's not good when you think of it because it's like, okay, well, we know that a bad insulation, if it's installed perfectly and everything, maybe you get an R19, but they're not really getting that.
Right.
And it's okay, well, how do we stop some of that? How do we stop and make it so that you don't have a cold spot in your wall because you have a big picture window? Well, we have to look at, there's different ratings for windows, right? So they go by a U factor, but we can convert that to an R factor. Well, most windows are like an R3.
Mm-hmm.
So we can look at when we're doing modeling for a house, which is not required where we are. But we could look and go, oh, okay, well, what if we just change the U factor in the window? What if we stagger the studs when we're framing the house? So they offset not every 16 inches, but it's actually every 12 inches, but you're going back and forth. So then the insulation weaves through it and you don't have that thermal bridging. Is it using zip sheeting with, the insulation tied onto it? Or is it zip and you're putting sheeting on the outside? I mean, zip is one of the options, right? We know we can put plywood on and there's painted things you can put on. There's all kinds of stuff that you can do. But it's looking at where are you in the climate zones and how we detail that wall. Because how you're going to do a wall is probably a little bit different, but it's still factoring in and looking at, okay, well, what do we need to plan for? You have big temperature swings. Like we don't have as much of it, but we have real cold when it's cold out. And real warm in your house. So we're battling that more than like big giant ones between day and night. So, I mean, thermal's a big one because a lot of people just understand insulation. They're not really, the lay person is not going to get into, they understand water and it being an issue. And when you show them, they're like, oh yeah, my buddy's house had that. Or we have to close all of our windows because they rotted out like that.
Yeah.
Right? But when you talk a thermal or a blanket being put on yourself, people totally get that. And it's easy to talk about. It's honestly the cost to make sure that's detailed right is so minimal compared to a basic insulation package. There's just a lot of value to be had there when you're talking comfortability.
So we talked about the key components, right? Water control, air control, vapor, and thermal. Do you want to let us know kind of what are some of the building science techniques and passive house techniques that you've started to kind of incorporate into some of your projects?
Yeah, so it's looking at those 4 control layers and how can we can we detail those fitting in line with making it a viable option for the clients that we're building for, right? Because we kind of talked about we're probably not going to go full passive house because of just costs and how super detailed some of that stuff has to be. So let's just start, right? The water control layer. Most of our homes now, and it'll probably be all of them, are not going to be putting OSB sheeting on and then using some type of house wrap, right? And there's no problem with the house wraps. It's just they're not detailed right. So we need to get a product out there that's easier to detail, like Zip or LP Weather Logic or some of the painted on ones that all the seams are taken care of. And that's before we put in any windows or doors or anything like that, right? So we should be able to look at it and go, oh, okay, we have everything watertight. And before we even put siding on, we could take a fire hose, run it on the house, and we should not get any water in the house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then we'll go, okay, well, now we got to think about air. Ideally, if we're not getting water in, we're also doing a great job with air. However, right, where you talked about the overhangs on your house, how are we detailing that? Do we have, in your area, I think you probably do more insulated roofs, right? Like a hot roof?
Yes. Yeah, it's pretty common practice here.
Yeah, so here we don't. So if I'm monopoly framed, I need to get that ventilation to come in and go up and out the ridge.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not necessarily a great idea for us unless I was going to do a hot roof. Mm-hmm. And most of the time we're not doing that here just because we have basements.
Right.
So, we're looking at, when you're talking about that air sealing, we have water hits our wall, it runs down, and we usually have a little overhang between the basement and then the walls that we're building so that water sheds off and runs down.
Mm-hmm.
If it's off for some reason, how are you sealing that and making sure that water sheds away, right? So we want to air seal that gap from the mud sill to the bottom plate, right? So the mud sill is our concrete wall, and then we're going to put our 2x6 bottom plate down. Mm-hmm. Well, if we just stick that down on it, right, we have a capillary action that's going to suck water up from the concrete. So we need a break between that. Plus, we should also be thinking about, okay, let's seal this with some type of sealant or something before we even go to the tape detail. So it's not just a one thing is going to stop all of this. It's like there's a lot of details that go into it overall versus just like, oh, cool, let's air seal, let's do this. Most people, if you say, hey, make sure this home is air sealed properly so that our ERV is the most efficient possible, they're going to do it the same way they've always done it. And like, well, now you shouldn't have spent the money for that. Sorry, I can get off on tangents. We could probably just take one subject and go like, hey, let's talk about vapor in a wall.
Yeah, no, I'm the exact same way. I think that's kind of what brought us into the training that we did, the certification that we got, and ultimately the field that we're in. And I don't think either one of us started looking at all these components and how to do them better so that we could become multimillionaires. I think we necessarily did it because we knew there was a better way of doing things and wanted to educate the public and be the guy that does it.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we do this, right? Like people never believe me, but like I'm an introvert actually. But if we want to raise the standard, it's our job and our duty, our moral obligation to take care of our clients, right? Like they don't say that builders are fiduciaries, but we should be. We should be looking out for their best interests. Well, what's your best interest when you have 3 kids at home that are under 6? Just letting it go because it's code? Or should we educate them and say, hey, yes, you got a bid from somebody else for 40 grand less. Here's why.
Right.
And sometimes it's just because we spec the actual appliances that they wanted, like Wolf and Sub-Zero, and they put $3,000 in for an allowance. So it's not even always that we're doing these details better. It's, hey, they just have to learn to compare apples to apples and then also see like, hey, can we see some of the homes? Can you explain to me and show me what you're doing to air detail? I mean, we just put for our channel, we just put the video out about like the number one question to ask your builder is what's your water management strategy?
Yeah.
And most are going to be like, I put a roof on and siding.
Yeah. You're exactly right. See, TJ, you brought something up that I find kind of interesting. A lot of people that do shop around for a home builder, um, let's face it, oftentimes they go with the one who's most readily available and then also the cheapest price. And I know you and I both spend a lot of time on like a pre-construction process, right? So where we're actually planning out these details that go into the homes, oftentimes planning out all the selections on our custom homes. And, we have a detailed estimate quote that we're giving out. And I saw recently you guys had one, and I don't remember the exact percentages, but your like change order overage percentages were like half or less of the surrounding builders in your area. Is that right? Am I on base with that?
Yeah, so I don't remember the website, but I had looked up at one point, what was the national average builders are going over. And I swear it was like 14 or 16%, right? And we're trying to get it better every time. But we don't give a quote out in a day or 7 days, right? People are like, oh, well, this tract home builder told me. Well, we don't build the same home over and over. We don't detail the walls the same. It's based on where you're at. How much shade do you have coming into your house? Do we need to do this like this? Are we going to do bigger overhangs? But it's going super detailed in like what trim, what light fixture, how are we putting the walls together? A huge one, right? What are the windows? I mean, a window budget can vary tremendously based on what we're trying to do. So we spend a lot of time on the front end just getting a true budget. So it's like, if we build this house today based on all your picks, this is your price, right? Now, inevitably, people change some stuff, sometimes for their benefit. Sometimes, I shouldn't say it's a detriment that they spend more, but they have that change order. And let's say it's, a $500,000 build, and they decide to put granite tops in the bathrooms, and that's not what we had in there originally. Cool. They get a change order that day. It goes from 500 to 502, and they see that right there. There's not like at the end, oh, you had 17 change orders and you went over $48,000, and you're like,
Yeah, which is it's common. It's that's how a lot of builders get their clientele is they underbid, overpromise, underdeliver, and overcharge at the end of it. Where you and I are both in the realm of, hey, we want to tell you what the price is, spend time doing it, and then hold true to that price unless it's something that you did change your mind on in the future. Maybe you wanted to upgrade that shower with some body sprays or a rain head, and you didn't. We may have even gone over it, but at the time of design, you didn't want it. Now you do. And that's another important question that I think homeowners can, or, potential clients can be asking their builders. Hey, what do some of your projects look like? How close are you staying to the numbers? And are those client-driven change orders? Or are those builder-driven change orders?
Yeah, no, I think that's great because ours is like, we do cost plus. I guess I didn't even ask how you're doing it. So legitimately, people can see every bill that comes in. Not legitimately, they do. They see all of them, and then we get a percentage above that. And you hear, well, you just want to sell more. I don't actually really hear this. People will say like, well, you want to spend more money. No, I want to give you the best house possible. If you want to pick, all color fixtures and a gold toilet, that's up to you. But I want to make sure the detail of those 4 control layers is better than anyone else in the area is going to do for you. And if we do that right, all the rest of the stuff will look good. Yes, we're going to have good finish carpenters. Yes, we're going to help you get the install properly on everything that you use. Like, that's all good. But yeah, I've run into for sure people, why is it taking so long? Why is it taking so long? Okay, did you go in to talk to the fireplace people yet? No, I want that number. Otherwise, I know what happens is I put an allowance in and you go over. Because as soon as I say your fireplace allowance is 10 grand, you spend 11. If I say it's 6, you spend 7.
Well, and let's face it, those stores have conveniently displayed the high-end items in the most obvious areas, and it never fails. It's like you have the customers like, we want, basic fixtures, basic fireplace, basic appliances.
Yeah.
And so we'll do, we build the budget out and we we do plug numbers in before we've actually got the final numbers in, but it never fails. It's like, oh, I didn't realize that a basic fixture, was your Brizo $950 kitchen faucet.
Yeah, totally true. And totally, like, I don't want to act like we don't, right? Because we do for some of the stuff, but they know that. And in our workup sheet, it says it's an allowance, and you understand this is an allowance. However, we've also had people go in, maybe we put 15,000 in appliances based on what we talked about, and they spend 12. Cool. They save that $3,000.
Yeah.
So it works both ways for us on that end. So if they spend less, great, good for you. But if you spend more, that brought it up. But outside of, we don't really manage any change orders. If we screw something up, that's on us, right? But when we have people doing change orders and we're helping them along the way, honestly, we're coming in at budget or under. Right. And some of that is, okay, well, we put a nice, we usually put 10,000 or so in there just for miscellaneous. Like, oops, sorry, I need one more, sheet of OSB or whatever I might need. I'm not going to go get a change order for that all the time, but we normally don't spend all of that either. So,
yeah. Well, so kind of the last question I wanted to bring up is what are you doing to kind of educate your clients, kind of reach out to maybe the people who aren't even looking for that high performance house? What are some of those things that you're doing to reach out to them? And when you do get a hold of them, what are you telling them?
Yeah. So we kind of built out so when we started doing the videos and some of this stuff, it was like, what are the things people should be asking and looking for? So that helps first, is we have a library now being built up of like, hey, why should I care about insulation? For example, hey, what is this water management strategy detail? So it's super easy to send them just links to it, right? So I can be like, hey, check out this video. We have all of that stuff when people are coming into our ecosphere or system. They're getting put on that, where they're getting the email once a week that's coming out with stuff that we're talking about. So if it's relevant to them, great. Because we know sometimes there's a long process in the buy time or build time. So we're trying to educate all along the way, but then it's also educating during, a meeting with somebody. And it's not, you can't just bombard somebody with all of this, right? Like, because you're talking Delta T and you're saying, the perm ratings and all that, like we're not talking that, right? I'm doing, your health, comfortability. And I don't, like I said, I don't ever get into, well, putting in the heat pump water heater is going to save you this. Yes, later on they find out that there's credits and stuff for some of those things, but that's not, I don't want people to build with me because of that. I want, they know, like, and trust and look at us like a fiduciary that's looking out for their clients. Yeah. So that's a lot of the education process with it. When we meet with people, I like to take them to a house that we have and framing, because that's where you can show, it's easy to show all of that stuff. It's easy to show, like, hey, we air sealed this detail. Here's what I'm talking about with air sealing. Here's why this is actually your water control layer, not this dude's vinyl siding over here. Right. Oh, by the way, here's a picture of one that did a house wrap, and they were siding right over this with this huge cut here. They will have rot in this portion someday. Right. So there's a lot of education with it, but I think we can make it simplified to those big things, right? Our health, the durability of, our health, the comfortability in the home, and the durability. Like, I don't say it's a legacy thing, right? But it's, you can pass this house down to your kids or grandkids if you want, especially when you're talking people that are putting up stuff on the lake homes or like a retirement home, stuff like that the family's all going to come to for, ideally generations. I will say that, most of the standards for building in Wisconsin, you're getting 100-year house, maybe. And people are proud of that. I'm not proud of that. If we go to some of our homes, when I'm a ghost or in heaven and I go by some of the homes, I want it to be there in 500 or 1,000 years. Are we there yet? Probably not. But the strive is to get better and better and better. And the house I'm building today, the next one I'll learn stuff and get better, and the next one get better. It's not ho hum, I'm going the same way all the way along. Like,
right.
you know, we'll continue to go to conferences and classes, and it's like, okay, how can I incorporate this? What about this? How am I making sure? Oh shoot, I put this detail wrong. Now, you know, we're standing behind that and we're going to fix it and make it right if something happened. It hasn't yet, knock on wood, right? But inevitably, stuff happens. So do we stand behind our work? Does your builder stand behind their work, right? You know, a 1 year warranty to me is, I mean, we do 2 years, and I'm like, I'm really going to stand behind it longer than that anyway. So I should probably say that anyhow, because we're in our neighborhoods, right? We're not a big track home builder that is like, here's a number. I mean, their homes are going to make it 100 years maybe. There's a ton of homes in our neighborhoods. Sorry, in neighborhoods around me. I always call them the, you know, the box cutter home. I could break into it with a box cutter. There's no recipe. It's like a piece of little crappy sheet. It's not even sheeting. It's like this thin cardboardy.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And like after that, I just punch a hole in your drywall. So,
yeah, and I think, you know, to kind of expand on some of the production home builders, their goal at the end of every day is to make an extra dollar on whatever they're doing the same way or slightly modifying it, probably for the worst, to make a little extra money on the same end result. Whereas our goal at the end of the day is to build better every time we do it. So yeah, the house I'm building today, well, I'm super happy with that house and the fact that we're able to achieve what we're going to achieve. The next house is going to be better. There's going to be something that I've learned, that I picked up, that I've either learned on the job site. Hey, we could do this, or I've read about, watched, seen on YouTube or whatever. That's a great idea. I'm going to incorporate that. And as long as we continue to do that, our houses will get better and better. Where on the flip side of that, these production builders, where, hey, if instead of having break around the back patio, if we put, you know, that 40 square feet up of siding, we just saved $120 on this house. You and I would never even consider doing something like that to save $120. But when they're building 4,000 homes, that $120 affects their bottom line a whole lot. And they do it every year, and it just continually starts to downgrade these homes.
Yeah.
We want to do the opposite of that. Take the swing the other way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even some of the stuff with, I don't know what you guys get for energy rebates. Like, those are for our client. I don't keep it. Our big track home builder. I mean, I know, because I was at a conference and then ran into a guy that runs some of those rebate programs. They got $400,000 back from putting in heat pump water heaters.
Yeah.
I'm like, that's why they do it, right? It's not necessarily because that was better. I'm glad they're doing it, but it's like that should be yours as the client, because you're paying for that stuff, not me. I'm getting paid to put your house together and detail it and do that stuff right. But when you look at, I get it. There's a place for it. People can afford that house, but it's still just, you have to be able to understand that, and that's who they're looking out for, right? Inevitably, on almost every house we do, I'm doing something that's coming off of our profit because it's the right thing to do. Or I just want to make it a little better, to be like, hey, I know you didn't want to do this. We did it for you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's people, right? Like, so that's why we probably connected, right? Some of the people in our class were forced to be there. We were there because we wanted to get better. So it's that constant and never ending search for improvement. So it's not stopping for me. And I know it's not stopping for you. Like, oh, I have this now. So I'm good to go. Right. We're still like, how do we get better? Get better, get better, get better, get better, get better. Oh, I learned a ton in Phius. Oh, and now all of a sudden I take a class about windows, and now I understand that more versus just relying on an energy modeling system. It's like, and you have a really unique perspective because you know a bunch of the stuff in the trades. I know how to frame. I can electrocute myself, but I don't mess with plumbing, right? But even my electrical, I'm not doing that stuff anymore. I will in my house.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's learning about those things that help, and, you know, what can we do electrical wise that's going to make your house more comfortable, use less energy? Is it low voltage lighting? Is that stuff viable for how people are living in their homes? But that's where you and I were sitting down with clients, and you're having that conversation. How are you using your home? Do you
Mhm.
work from home? Do you want to be by your kids? How old are your kids? You don't have any kids yet? What if we're going to have kids? Let's think about this, 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 and this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, anytime it's a forever home, I have people say it's a forever home and they've moved already. But I think there's things to think about that's huge with longevity. Now, I think we should do those things on every house. But I also get when people are like, look, we're 30 years old. This isn't our forever home. We just want a new home that we're going to be here 10 or 15 years or maybe less. And then when we do our forever, we've seen your videos and the information and we want to do all of it then. So then it's that conversation. How do we prioritize this and do what's right for you?
Yeah.
So,
well, TJ, I appreciate you joining me on here today. And is there anything you'd like to add? Would you like to tell us how people in your area that might be watching this can get a hold of you?
So you can reach out, or actually it's probably easiest if you shoot me a text, just because I might be, hopefully Jordan has me on again, doesn't get too famous on me. And then,
absolutely.
So my number is 608-719-3720. So you can text that. We're on social and YouTube, Facebook, and what's the other one? Instagram.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're mostly all under Sanctified Homes and Construction, but I can get you those links if you want to put them in the description.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll put them in the description. And is your website also linking all of these as well? Do you kind of have a link tree or are they kind of separate?
Yeah. So our website is wisconsinhomebuild.com.
Okay.
Oh, you can find all of our videos are actually on there too, but
very cool.
You can find us and all that information on there too. So yeah, I mean, it's always good to talk and connect with people that are like you, where I want, that I would say it's that constant, never ending search for improvement.
Right.
Because I talk to a lot of great builders, but they're still building the same home they were doing 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Nice people, whatever it is, but it's like, talk to the builders that have been doing it 20, 25 years, at least a lot in our area. It's like, no, they got to breathe. No, we need to breathe. We need to control the air and everything coming in our house so it's safe and durable and all of those things. But I think a lot of it's coming down to people like us where we're trying to educate, do a better job. So I appreciate what you're doing, getting stuff out there and super informational. So yeah, I appreciate the time and having me on. And
absolutely. I'd love to have you back on. Maybe you can kind of be one of the podcast regulars. It seems like we've got a lot of common ground to educate together and inform the people around us of what they could be getting, what we could be doing, and how they could be living. So I appreciate it very much. We'll put a link of all your description below with the phone number and all that stuff when this actually goes air. But again, thank you very much for joining me on here. I enjoyed it. Hope to do it again soon.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. I appreciate it, Jordan.
All right. Until next time, this is the Buildwise Podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Dugan. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Buildwise Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to catch our next episode. For more residential home building industry insights, check out Caprock Design Build at caprockdb.com or give us a call at 806-808-1352. Thanks, and see you next time.